So I don't know about you, but one of my favorite ways to grow plants is semi-hydroponically using the Lechuza Pon substrate. However, Lechuza Pon has been absolutely impossible to find for what seems like a year at this point, at least in the US, because it may be more accessible in other countries. But it's always out of stock here, and it honestly costs an arm and a leg just to get it shipped to my location. So what I've been doing is I've started making my own DIY pon at home. And today I'm gonna share that recipe with you, plus all of the tips, tricks, and knowledge that I've accumulated over the years growing in pon. If you're just starting out in semi-hydro and you wanna learn more about pon and how to use it, or if you've been wanting to make your own DIY pon and just didn't really know where to start, then this is the perfect video for you. Hey plant fam, welcome back to Shy Girl Plants. If you're brand new and just joining me, my name is Cheyenne, and I am so glad you're here. Because in today's video, we're gonna be talking all about pon and semi-hydro. Now, if you're not familiar with either of those things, let me first break down the basics. What the heck is Lechuza Pon and what the heck is semi-hydro? First off, semi-hydro is short for semi-hydroponics, and that is a way of growing in an inorganic medium, meaning you're not using any soil, and you always have a water reservoir that the plant can draw from. As an example, and to put that into perspective, this is my variegated Fallopian multiflora, and it's in a self-watering pot and growing in Lechuza Pon. I had to check if it was My DIY Pon or Lechuza Pon, since a lot of my plants have been established in the Lechuza brand pon for a long time. But this would be an example of semi-hydro. And this would be too. This is my Alocasia Blizzard, which is so bushy and so beautiful. And I have her in a DIY self-watering pot that I made myself by poking some holes in a 32-ounce deli container that I probably got from dinner at one point. So in these setups, the plant is potted into an inorganic medium of choice, which is typically a porous rock that retains water. This could be perlite, pumice, leca, pon, which is a mix of pumice, zeolites, and lava rock. Then we would give it a water reserve that it can draw from at all times. By doing this, the porous rocks will wick up water from the water reserve. Then the plant, whose root system has established in our inorganic medium, can suck up as much water as they want when they want to, which is really fantastic for thirstier plants like this Alocasia. In my opinion, they are thirstier plants. And it's also really helpful for us as plant parents, especially if you're an overwaterer, or if you're like me and you have close to 400 plants, and that's a lot of watering to do. So you have more control over watering. You don't have to water as often in this setup, and it's just a lot more convenient. Another example of a semi-hydro setup would be like my multiflora, which is in another self-watering pot. So in this example, it is potted in the inner pot, in the pon. Then it has a wicking system, which sits in the cache pot, which has water in there. And then the wick will bring water up to the porous rock, and then the plant, whose roots have grown in there, can suck up as much water as it needs. So that's just another example of semi-hydro setup. Now, as I mentioned, pon is a mix of pumice, zeolites, and lava rock. When I say Lechuza Pon, that is a specific brand of pon created by Lechuza, which is a company located in Germany. And they have become pretty popular for their pon and for their self-watering pots that are used in conjunction with the pon that they have made. In the Lechuza brand pon, they use the 3 stones that I mentioned plus slow-release fertilizer. And that pre-balanced mix does a really good job of giving the plant a good ratio of water, nutrients, and aeration. When I make my own pon, I exclude the use of slow-release fertilizer in my recipe because I use a liquid fertilizer with every watering for all of my plants. So it's totally up to you if you'd like to include that in your mix, but in today's video, I won't be including that. So now that we've gotten the basics out of the way, let's talk a little bit about cost. So right now on Amazon, I can find a 6-liter bag of Lechuza Pon for $30 plus an additional $41 shipping. So in total, I would be paying $71 for the 6-liter bag of Lechuza, and it would take about a month and a half to get to me in Southern California. So in my opinion, that is not worth it, and that is why I've started making my own pon at home, which you can too. I found each of the individual ingredients that I need, which is the pumice, zeolites, and lava rock, on Amazon in bulk. If you'd like to see exactly what I got, I do have my Amazon storefront linked below in the description. I do get a small commission if you shop from there, but please, by no means, don't feel obligated to go and shop from there. It's just a convenient way for me to list all the things that I talk about. I personally do like it when influencers or YouTubers post their storefronts and whatever, because it makes it easy for me to find what they were talking about, but I don't want you to feel like you have to go and use that. You can absolutely go and find those ingredients locally. You can just buy it on Amazon without using my links, but it's there if you would like to reference it. So buying all of these ingredients in bulk is gonna have a larger upfront cost than the one bag of Lechuza. However, when we break this down, it actually is more cost effective than that single bag. So for buying each of the ingredients individually, I spent about $123 total to buy those 3 stones in bulk. However, when I put that all together, it yields about 6-liter bags of pon, which comes out to about $20 per 6-liter bag. So that's way more cost effective than buying the 1 6-liter Lechuza Pon bag and having that shipped. So yes, the upfront cost is going to be a little bit more, but it yields more and you're going to have a better deal overall. But in any case, all the ingredients that I'm using today, I got off Amazon. However, I have found all the ingredients for this locally to me as well. For example, I found an 8-quart bag of pumice at a local garden center near me for $7.99, which is pretty good. I know places like Home Depot will carry zeolites because zeolites is used as like a snow traction material that you can put down on snow and it helps melt it. I think that's how it works. I don't live in a snow state, so I'm not familiar with using that for snow, but on the bags that I bought, it does say like snow traction and stuff like that. And I know Home Depot has lava rock and stuff, but the sizes of the stones may differ if you get it from different places. Personally, I like to use smaller stones and get it as close as possible to the Lechuza Pon size. However, it's not going to be perfect or exact, and that's okay. Speaking of which, you don't have to use smaller stones in your pon mix. You can use bigger stones and chunkier stones and have a more aerated mix. I recommend using a bigger or chunkier mix if you're planting something like an anthurium that have big hardy roots. I feel like they do better when they have a bigger, more chunky substrate. Versus like a Hoya, which has smaller, finer roots. Those would do really well in like a small stoned mix. But you have options and it doesn't have to be perfect. I can give you the ratios of all those stones that I've been using that have been working for me, but you can go ahead and customize those as well. I know that I may use more pumice to zeolites and lava rock, and you may want to use more of one of the other, and that's totally fine. That's the wonderful thing about being a plant parent and being in this hobby, is that you have options and you can experiment and try things out and figure out what works for you. So even though I'm sharing all this information today, you don't have to use it to a T. You can customize it as needed. So with all that being said, all of that talking, let's get into the fun stuff and mixing up our batch of pon. Okay, so here is my little plastic shoebox container that I'm gonna use to mix my batch of pon. Today I'll be mixing just one batch. However, if you've bought ingredients in bulk, then you can mix up way more than that, which is what I do. But for the purpose of this video, I'm just gonna make one batch. And in that one batch, I felt the best way to communicate measurements or the recipe to you was in parts. So the recipe is 2 parts pumice to 1 part lava rock and 1 part zeolites. As I mentioned, I am not going to include slow release fertilizer in my mix because I use the Super Thrive Foliage Pro liquid fertilizer in every watering. So if you have a liquid fertilizer that you use, that's totally cool. You can use it with this. Or if you want to throw in the slow release fertilizer, I would say about half cup to 3/4 cup would be good if you're mixing one batch. Yeah, that would be a good mix. That's it. It's pretty simple. So let's go ahead and put all of this together. So here's our 2 parts pumice. Then our 1 part lava rock. And our 1 part zeolites. Okay, now, as you saw, all of these stones are pretty dusty. So you have a few options here. You could either wash all of these ingredients individually before putting your mix together, or you could be like me and put the mix together and then go and rinse it off. Yeah, I typically rinse mine after I'm done mixing it. And if you are going to make a big batch, or if you are able to and have the space, I would recommend putting this together outside since it is dusty and has a lot of sediment and dust buildup and stuff like that. So there's that. When you go and rinse this mix, you definitely want to wash or rinse it outside. You don't want to wash this in your kitchen sink or in your bathroom or anything like that because the sediment buildup will do damage to your pipes. It can build up and just cause a lot of not good things for your pipes, so definitely avoid rinsing this out indoors. The other thing I wanted to point out with using an inorganic medium or a porous rock like this is that you will have to flush your plants that are grown in this every once in a while. The reason we have to do that is because if you're using any sort of fertilizers, slow release fertilizers, all that nutrients is going to build up over time. And in addition, you are going to have like sediment and dust and stuff that collects. So you'll want to give these a rinse about once or twice a month. I typically do it once or twice a month. And really all you have to do is take the inner pot out or whatever setup that you have and run fresh water through there for like a minute or so to give it a good rinse. Another thing that happens, especially when you're using a clear pot like this or this clear semi-hydro pot that I have, is that algae growth will happen, especially if you're using liquid fertilizer. So that's another reason why you'll have to give this a good flush. In this setup that I've made, my 32-ounce deli container, if you would like to adopt this thing, you would just, the way that I made this is I took a soldering iron, I have a soldering iron, and I poked holes all around about almost half to 3/4 or 1/3 of the way up. And then in the bottom, I've put leca, so that will be my water reserve section, and then the rest is pon. The reason I do this is because when I have to go and flush this, these holes make it really easy to run water through it, and they just comes out, and then that water reserve will always be there at the bottom. So I kind of know where to fill this up every time I do. So that's a DIY setup that you could use if you want to create your own. You could also take plastic cups like this. This is like a, is this a 16-ounce cup? I think this is like a 16-ounce cup size, and then you could take like a 12-ounce cup or a 9-ounce cup, any smaller cup that would fit inside, so that you would have a reserve at the bottom where you could put water. You could create a wicking system, same thing. There's a lot of different ways to do this, but those are just some examples. So let me grab a soil scoop, forgot what it was called for a second, and then we'll mix this up. Here we go. All right, so let's mix up our DIY pon. Crunchy. All right, so that is it. That is our DIY pon batch. These pumice stones that I got are a little bit chunkier than the Lechuza brand ones, but that is okay. I don't mind it. I have a couple of plants potted in this mix since I bought this batch of stones, and they're doing fantastic. I will show those to you. So here are some examples of some plants that I recently potted up in this DIY mix that I just showed you how to make. This is my Alocasia Dragon Scale Mint. Look at that new leaf, so pretty. And this is a Alocasia longiloba green on green, which I don't know if you can really see the green on green part just yet. A little bit you can see it. But in any case, these two are potted and established now in this DIY mix that I just showed you. And they're doing great in their little self-watering pots. So there you go. So one cool thing about Pon, or any inorganic medium porous stones that you use to grow plants in, is that this stuff is reusable. So what I would do if I am upsizing a plant or repotting a plant and I'm going to change out the pond or something, you can actually keep that and rinse it off, and then you can boil it to kind of sanitize it and get any gunk that's left off of it. Then you can let it dry, you could store it, and you can use it again. Same thing goes for leca. You can do that with straight pumice. I'm pretty sure you can do it with perlite too, though those kind of break apart a little bit easier, so those might break down more. Not sure. I don't grow in just perlite really that often. But in any case, you can reuse this stuff, so that's super convenient. But that's really it. Super simple DIY pond. Now all I would do with this is I would go and rinse this out, and then I will use it to pot up some plants that I'm gonna have in semi-hydro. And that's it. That's really all there is to it to start making your own DIY pond at home. It's a lot more simple than it seems. I know when I first started getting into pond and trying to figure out how to do it myself, I was really intimidated and watched so many videos and read so much about it, trying to figure out how to do it. And honestly, it's a lot easier than it seems. And I encourage you to just go and try if you haven't yet. You will find what works for you, and you will figure out a mix that you like, and really just have fun with it. That's really all I can say. That's the whole beautiful part of this plant hobby, is that we get to experiment and try new things, and that's awesome. So thank you so much for joining me today and spending a little time with me as we made our own batch of pon. If you learned something new, if you picked up a new tip or trick, or if you're a pon and semi-hydro pro and you have tips and tricks to share with us, I'd love it if you would throw those down into the chat so that we can all continue to learn and grow together. I guess that's it. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!